On this episode, we had a big week. Turk and Joe went to the 2020 Land Expo in Des Moines, while Ben, Tommy, and Carley went to the Independent Professional Seed Association Conference in Kansas City. Watch the whole episode to hear some valuable information you can apply in 2020.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Cup of Joe, episode number 25, season 2. Today we have our regulars Tommy, Turk, and Ben, and we have a lot of new information to share because we've been attending some national meetings, and we're going to start off with Ben first.
Like you said, we were at the Independent Professional Seed Association meeting, and the term we call IPSA. We each had an opportunity to go to about 4 breakout sessions and some general sessions. There's some sales training and a bunch of other stuff that was going on there. But one of the things that you have always gone to in the past is the seed treatment trials. So I went to the seed treatment trials that IPSA actually performs, and it's it's an independent test of everybody in the market that wants to test.
Basically what all the seed companies do is they pool their resources, hire a tester, give them a protocol, select products, they run the tests, report back to the membership.
Right. So there was some tripidity being tested. There were some other biostimulants that are being tested, and it's showing that the biostimulants are really starting to grab traction. They're kind of starting to figure things out, and the industry is figuring out that there's some real yield advantage with the biostimulant portion of the market. So we have biostimulant on ours. We've talked about it a dozen times on Cup of Joe. Our tripidity on our soybeans helps the beans come out of the ground faster. It's a 3 component mixture that gets the beans out of the ground. So
yeah, it's not a biological, but it's actually nutrients and enzymes and various components that mitigate stress. In other words, when that seed's germinating, if there's stress, it helps it get through it.
Correct. And I think one of the main things that they talked about at IPSA, with it being 2020, the whole theme behind IPSA was clearly independent, and they were looking at what's the next 20 years the agricultural industry going to be bringing forward, and that's kind of the main theme. So I went to another meeting on what's the next 20 years going to look like and how agriculture is going to change, and they're talking a lot about technology and how a lot of farming is going to be done completely different, and we're not going to recognize it in the next 20 years. So there's going to be a lot more automation. The big are only going to get bigger, and we have to figure out how to service that style of clientele. So
Ben, and I remember they were talking about a little bit of how blockchain is going to come into the farming market. Did you hear a little bit about that?
Yep.
Let's just kind of define what blockchain actually is. I mean, that's kind of a term that you're hearing more and more, but what actually is blockchain?
So from the best of my understanding, blockchain is going to be where you basically pool. In a farming community, blockchain is where you basically pool all of the farmer's data so that he has all of his financial statements and balance statements and everything together, and it's all basically comprised, and it's going to be something that's going to be able to be scanned on his phone. And he walks into a tractor dealership, he sets his phone down, they scan it, they say, yep, you're good to go, you're able to buy this tractor. It's a bunch of little 5-gallon buckets is how it was described. And
like a toll booth.
Like a toll booth.
With all your financials.
And once you scan that, you buy your tractor, and now your tractor's in another little 5-gallon bucket, and you know everything that tractor comes a part of the entity, and you know what your depreciation on that tractor is, you know what your payments are on that tractor, you know what the warranty is on that tractor, you know everything about that. And there's a whole bunch of those little toll booths or 5-gallon buckets that are all interconnected, and it ties everybody's financial statements, that farmer's. It basically ties the financial statements of that farmer all together.
And basically that means, it prevents fake currency with faster, quicker times, or faster closing times, so to speak. You'll be able to buy a house with your information inputted to where it needs to go in a 10-minute process.
So it's kind of an organization of pretty much everything that's
the only
pertains to whatever
whatever business you're doing.
Business you're in, yeah.
And it's the only current currency, so to speak, that is not counterfeitable. So there's no hiding finances. This is better for tracking taxes and a business, which obviously what we learned a little bit is successful farming is going to be a lot more run like a business. So
Who all's going to have that? I mean, you're basically going to be able to go talk to your guy where you buy your pickups, where you buy your planted, but where you buy your seed.
Absolutely.
Anybody and everybody's basically it's an instant credit system.
Yep.
blockchain will be how business is done the next 20 years.
It's going to be very apparent the next 5 years. We're going to see it a lot, but
Yes.
it's going to be one of those deals where it's going to be as common as a common credit card.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So, and that kind of ties into what you guys were learning, or what some of the stuff you guys were seeing also at your conference as well,
Yeah,
right,
they had a
Joe?
blockchain breakout session, but I did not attend it. Attended some of the other ones, but one of the things I would like to mention, you talked about how farming is going to change and everything. I'd like to talk about, I went to the farm credit breakout session and just talked about what's going on there. And just to give you some statistics, because farmers always like to know what's really going on. And right now, on land sales, 79% of the land that's being transferred is being bought by farmers and 9% by local investors. So it's really still being held very closely. And 49% of all land sales are auctions, and the best is being the number one method for selling land. And the average price that a farmer is paying for land based on the corn suitability index is 108.16 in 2019. And in 2013, it was 141.69 on the corn suitability rating. And Iowa has a system where they rate the ground based on 0 to 100. There's a change now a little bit here in the last few years too. There's another CSR2 rating too, but they reported 108.16 is what land was selling. Best time to sell land is fourth quarter of the year. That's when they typically get the best prices. They were saying land is very stable right now. There's low supply. There is really no other investment that is as attractive as land. There's a lot of willing buyers, and so things are on land. As far as a basis, which a lot of financial statements are based on their balance sheets on land. It's a very good commodity. Interesting enough, 80% of all land in Iowa is free and clear. There's no debt on it. And in the upper 70s is what is currently profitable for farmers in Iowa, and expected to go into the low 80s after 2019. That was 2018. So farmers are showing profitability. But another interesting statistic, they showed that you have to have 60% equity investment in land to get a return. So whatever you pay for land, if you have 60% of it paid up front, and there's a lot of farmers that are doing, paying at least 50% down on land that they're buying. So most of the farmers right now are working on rebuilding their capital and working capital, and values in general in the market are very stable. They also talked about analyzing the successful grain producers and what they all had in common, and they treat their farming business, they treat their farming operation like a business, not a lifestyle. They're reviewing and analyzing their numbers on a regular basis, not just once a year. The numbers drive all their business decisions, and they are putting a higher priority on marketing plans or selling their grain. And they also are seeking professional help and advice to run their operations. And then they said some of the things that farmers can do to better position themselves is be better negotiators. And before we started this, I said, telling a farmer to be a better negotiator is like telling Michael Jordan and LeBron James you need to practice more. They're
pretty good.
They're pretty good right now. So we know that they're very good negotiators. They also they think farmers need to rethink how they're utilizing their machinery and equipment, walk away from poor business arrangements, put everything on the table. No lifetime guarantees in farming, and it never ends that you have to be proactive in farming. And the high revenue, low cost operation is currently the most profitable operation. So keep in mind, big yields are a blessing, not a given. Business plans have to be made on realistic yields, but long-term interest rates look, right now it's a gift to have these lower rates. You have to make cash flow adjustments as you go along, and selling assets can be one of the best decisions you can make to create viability in your farming operation. The pain of this current this current cycle that we're in right now in farming, they have found to be evenly distributed. Big guys and little guys are having problems. If they're in that 30%, or so, or 25% that are having some issues. So circumstances don't seem to change between the two groups. Anyhow, the key thing looking forward is that they're guardedly optimistic, and they think that we'll get another market facilitation payment. We'll get one more payment in 2020, and in general, that they think 2020 is going to be a continuation of 2019. In other words, we improved a little bit in 2019 over 2018, and we think we'll have a slight improvement in 2020, so it'll be a continuation. So they were pretty optimistic. I mean, I think, for lenders, they were pretty optimistic, not all the doom and gloom that you hear in some of the publications, but again, they're analyzing and working with farmers that know their numbers.
Joe, did they talk about anything about, with 2019 being a little bit of preventative plant year and some flooding and all these issues that we had, how long of a of that it's going to stretch out, how many years, if it's going to be 2 to 3 years of a rebound? Or?
Well, they did talk a little bit about that, in the fact that we have a more positive stocks to use ratio. Mm-hmm. We have a lower supply than we had a year ago because of preventive plant. So some of that preventive plant was very painful, but it actually has improved our position for 2019 had that not happened. So it's actually putting a base in for a better 2019 on prices and just in general because of those issues. The 2019 issues have created more prosperity for 2020.
Gotcha.
Potentially, if that makes sense.
No, it's interesting.
If you look at the USDA numbers, none of those USDA numbers, as Turk can talk about here next, are projecting anything of this potential China demand. So let's go right into that.
So yeah, the Ken Isley, the USDA Foreign Ag Service Administrator, was on the agenda, and he talked about trade in general and what's going on. 140 billion trade sold outside the United States. Obviously, the big news this week was the signing of the Phase 1 Chinese trade deal. And that's going to generate 40 to 50 billion. Some of that's in the market already, but like you said, the interesting point is the trade is not anticipating a whole lot more. They want it's kind of like show me first.
Yeah, they're all from Missouri, the show me state. The trade is not going to put any of those positive numbers into their projections until they see the Chinese step up to the plate.
So it's kind of buy the fact or buy the rumor and sell the fact. And so the the prices have been kind of working up. Now we've got the deal, and the traders said, okay, we got the deal now. I'm ready to cash in my chips a little bit. So look for the prices to maybe go down a little bit, but long term, we're going the right direction. In addition to the Chinese trade deal being signed, the U.S. MC was approved this week. Again, another great positive that will have an impact all for U.S. agriculture for years to come.
And that's the Mexico-Canada agreement replacing NAFTA.
Yes. We just recently signed an agreement with China for Japan for $13 billion trade deal. Beef will be the big winner there as the Chinese are wanting more beef. So again, lots of good things happening for agriculture. Again, we've got India that we don't have a deal with yet, but we're working on getting a trade deal with India as well. Obviously, India has the biggest population in the world, so lots of opportunity there as well coming down the road. So our trade negotiators are doing a fantastic job getting that trade moving in the right direction for all of us. The other thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit, Joe, is the futurist, and he talked about agriculture in the future.
And we might mention, Turk and I attended the Land Expo 2020 in Des Moines at the Event Center, which is put on by the People's Land Company. And Steve Brewer, head guy, very visionary, very much on top of what's going on. And it's a conference that is annually. It's usually the middle of January, and they bring some of the most insightful speakers that I've heard ever. And basically looking over the next hill. So let's talk about that futurist.
So this futurist was talking about hands-free farming in the future, 100% autonomous everything. Farmer never steps foot in that field. It's all done with robots, tractors that guide themselves, planters that do everything. Yeah, somebody's going to set it up at a central location and turn it loose. And the farmer can do 100% of everything he's done from his phone, no matter where he's at in the world. So very, very interesting information, and that includes fertilizer application, weeding, herbicide applications, everything. And we talked a little bit about the ability to fly drones over and determine weeds, populations, everything. That's 100%.
Turk, I can just see it now. You got these two 90-year-old farmers that go into town, stop by the convenience store, the coffee shop, and one of them gets his phone out and said, "Well, looks like I planted about 300 acres last night." The other farmer said, "Oh, I beat you. I planted 350." Nothing's changed.
Yeah, it reminds me of that joke with the two young boys standing by the corner fence. How long you been farming?
That's right.
So that's what it's going to be in the future. Is they're going to be pulling out their cell phone saying, "Yeah, I planted 2,000 acres today," or whatever. And the farms are going to be bigger. Less people required to do it. So it was a really interesting talk. It just kind of blows you away to listen to them talk about that. So
and it's just technologies, as you learned at your meeting, it's just going at a very rapid pace. In other words, well, if you don't like change, you best get out of this business because the fact that it's coming at a faster and faster pace, and you better pay attention.
And I think you can say, if you don't like change, I mean, you better get out of a lot of situations, because that's the way this country, this world, and everything's moving. That's where, farmers are a little bit of a, and we talk about trade agreements and everything, but it's not a United States thing anymore. It's a global market. We're all, China's a business that we're vying for, and we're all competitors in the global market.
And it sounds like the next growth market from what we're hearing is Southeast Asia.
Yep.
I know Vietnam is, when I was in high school, it was hell no, I won't go, because of the Vietnam War, but it is now going to be a big trade partner as they're getting more manufacturing and their standard of living is going up. They're wanting more meat, they want a better diet, and we're seeing the whole Southeast Asia area really going to be a bigger player for our crops in the future too.
Right. Turkey said autonomous tractor, and all I could think about was a farmer chasing his tractor down the road because it's just driving away. But, the same thing a little bit with some of the things I listened to, Joe, is, the most successful farmers, it's not a hobby, it's a business. And, guys that are planning ahead are the more successful out of the group. A few other things that I thought was less than 50% of farms have succession plans. And, the farming, we're in a world where, the baby boomers were the risk takers, and millennials are kind of sit back and think a little bit.
We had a little bit of that too, Tom. You said 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. Yeah. Every day. So, I mean, you guys are taking over is what it amounts to.
And I think, and it's a lot of compromise of learning from both generations that I think is going to make things successful. So it's like farming is a business, and that idea needs to be adopted for the farm to be around for the next 40 years. With all these things going on, we need to be willing to adapt, compromise, and learn at the same time.
Well, and I'm going to speak a little bit more as we add on about Simon Atkins, the climate risk economist and forecaster. But he's talking about change. He's talking about New York City. They have 57 recognized genders in that city.
57?
So 57
Genders.
Genders, yeah. It just tells you that things are changing.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that's bad.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's wrong or anything. But I'm just saying that what seems radical, and there was a speaker there that talked about that, what seems radical today and laughable, and as time goes on, it becomes more mainstream. They talked about plant-based meat, and how that's the biggest buzz thing going on now in the supermarket is plant-based meat, and how that's going to change. And I know you guys heard the same thing, that the consumer today wants to know what the cow's name was almost when they pick up that hamburger patty, and there's just a lot of ideas swirling around the outside that we think are crazy, and one of the speakers talked about how this process goes and how it becomes mainstream. And as farmers and as ag people, we have to pay attention to what our customers want. And when I say our customers, that's the ultimate consumer of our agricultural products.
And
So
it's coming because the middle of they show the economic growth curve. So anybody that is interested, Kevin Van Trump has a blog and a page out. He's one of the ones that was doing the talking. But the most economic growth of the baby boomers was when the biggest percentage of baby boomers were running from like 39 to 46 years old. That was when we had some of our best economic times, and we're getting closer to that point where millennials are at, when we're going to hit that economic growth time, and the demand from the millennial is going to be different than the demand from what the baby boomer was.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be exactly what you're talking about. It's, what's the word that he used, that I got to look for it here. Single cow burgers. So you're going to know exactly what cow your patty came from. The cows
If
might
it's-
have been
If
patty.
it's not a plant-based product.
Right, if it's not plant-based. So
I don't know if that makes me feel
And,
better.
and now they're basically growing meat in petri dishes,
Right.
and you don't need a whole herd
Yep.
to grow meat. You only need 10, 15 animals, and
Yep.
you can grow as much
Yep.
as 20,000.
They showed a chicken, didn't they? They said this chicken produces, I don't know how many thousands of pounds of meat, chicken breasts, and they cloned it basically from that chicken.
Yep.
So I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on that seems radical and strange, but we have to keep track of it. Like I said, as we move down that line of change, and the plant-based, which is interesting. It was not just for the vegan type eater. A vegan person is somebody that doesn't eat anything but plant-based, but they also don't wear leather belts, leather shoes. I mean, they're totally anti-animal and everything, but a plant-based consumer is somebody that may move in and out of plant-based. In other words, they may eat steak and then one time eat a plant-based cheeseburger. I mean, so the Impossible Burger at Burger King is I've not had one, but that's a plant-based, and that's just the beginning. So they're saying there's the vegetarian lifestyles are becoming more apparent, but there's also this in between that's coming out.
And
too.
I think that goes in with your 57 different types of genders.
Yep.
There's a place for everyone.
That's right.
Anybody who buys anything is a consumer, so they're going to make it available, and it's
That's
going to
exactly
go whichever
right.
way.
It's exactly right. So we're redefining everything. So these are things, but they also on the other side of the coin, they were talking about how much China is demanding meat, Southeast Asia is demanding meat. In other words, you could easily build a huge platform to say, well, our meat market is going to go away because it's all going to go plant-based. But on the other hand, there's this huge emerging market that wants meat. So there's still a lot of things that haven't been worked out.
land of opportunity.
That's right. And the reason why meat is so important to farmers, a grain farmer, is because 50% of our grain that we produce goes through the animal. It goes through the chickens and goes through pork and beef and everything else. So just a lot of things to watch.
A lot of information, a lot of good information.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Simon Atkins. He's a climate risk economist and forecaster, considered the most radical weatherman on the planet. And he's the one that told us about the And I said 57. It's 59. I just looked at
59.
Yeah, and he says that's 57 more than he thinks we need. That was his side thing.
Oh, for the genders.
Yeah, for the genders. But he said, in life, the more you complain, the worse it gets, and you got to change your thoughts. You got to change your energy, because and Turk's always said that what you think happens,
Right.
But he said the real thing in the world today is we just don't know what's fake and what's not is real. And he said in the Middle Ages it was just as warm as it is today, and then it cooled down. And he says we are going to go into a cooling cycle here starting in 2022 to 2029, 2032. So, and he's predicting this year 2020 is going to be warm and wet. He also said that China is going to have some major droughts coming, and the Chinese know this because the Chinese are very precise people. They know what happened the last 1,000 years, and they're projecting what they want to do the next 1,000 years. Our politicians, well, what do they think? Well, you think either on a 2-year cycle or a 4-year cycle because that's the election cycle.
Yep.
So everything he says is on the Earth's weather is controlled by solar sunspots, and when we have low solar activity, magnetics, we usually have good, more variable weather. But basically, it affects the Earth's currents, the magnetic field. But the interesting thing I found was that the stock market matches up. When we have low, we have magnetic fields and sunspot issues, we have a high stock market. And he's saying 2024, we're going to have major sunspot activities, and we're going to have a crash in the stock market based on history of solar sunspots. But
So to say when there's more solar flares, there's more active, unpredictable weather.
And then we'll also go into more of a cooler cycle too. So he also pointed out that the wildfires in Australia, volcanic activity, have put more carbon dioxide in the air than anything that humans can do. We can only control maybe 1 or 2%. Anyhow, very interesting guy. We hope to get his complete presentation, and we'll post it on Cup of Joe where you can see it. He was actually cut off a little bit short because he had so much information. But in general, he's looking for 2020 to be warm and wet, and then we're going to go into a cooling cycle shortly after that. So without, I know we took a lot of time today, and we'll bring more information next week. We'll keep integrating this information in as we have time. But as always, we sincerely appreciate your business, and we thank you very much. I know this past week with our deadline for the 0% financing on John Deere, we had a lot of orders in. Things have been going very strong at Merchant Seed, so we're focused on shipping and production right now. And we plan to be able to deliver what we sold and have extra available. So if you haven't ordered already, we encourage you to do so. So next week, we'll see you again. Take care.